Hey everyone, welcome to episode 11 of Formidable Opponents, or Formidable, depending on what region you're from. A show that pits three people who have known each other virtually their entire lives in a series of conversations as we argue what is best in a variety of fun, engaging, and critical topics we all debate about. I'm Randall, and with me as always, Bob and Joseph, and today we will be debating most shocking sports moment. Before we get started, I want to recognize our sponsor, Cerebral Digital LLC. Cerebral is a digital marketing firm based out of San Antonio, Texas. Cerebral offers you everything. We're talking about website management, social media management, and graphic design. A better, smarter way of marketing, a high energy, great customer service, and a quality product. You can find Cerebral on Instagram, Facebook, and all other social media platforms. Check them out. They do awesome work. And I also want to give a shout out to our graphic artist, Dina. You can check her out on Creative Little Pill on Instagram. She does all of our funny and creative cover art for all our episodes. We get a lot of compliments about that. Very talented. Check her out on Creative Little Pill on Instagram. Follow her. So today's topic, fellas, most shocking sports moment. Before we get to that, guys, how are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. It was a very hot day. I'm excited to talk about this, the whole build up this week when we talked about different moments. Even most recently, we'll talk about some pretty shocking stuff that we saw.
Yeah, exactly. Something even crazy that happened last night, right? Really looking forward to this episode and talking sports. You know, we all love sports. We're big sports fanatics.
Excellent. So we're talking today about the most shocking sports moment. Sports always find a way to surprise us, whether it's on the field, court, or ring, as we are talking about, or off the field. The final scores are only part of the story. We rewatch videos for moments. We look to see what gets us out of our seats and what makes us say, oh shit, when it causes us to take sides and argue. Sports fandom is a great sociological study. You can tell a lot by a true sports fan by how they break down and talk about shocking sports moments. I can't tell you final scores. Guys, I can't tell you who won MVP every year, but I can tell you how moments have emotionally impacted me and how they live on in lore. And that's what we're here to discuss. So guys, let's talk a little bit about shocking sports moment. What causes you to be shocked in the sports realm? What is a good shocking sports moment?
I mean, when I always think of a shocking sports moment, it is something that's never happened before, something I've never seen before. It has to be something that was televised, right, on the big stage. It can't just be something like, oh yeah, on the radio, or oh, this high school game. Like I feel like it should be on the big grand stage. It has to be something people still talk about today. You know, I mean, it's in every conversation when we talk football, we talk sports, we talk boxing, or something like that. And like you were saying before, just like the three amigos always say, infamous. It's got to be an infamous moment.
How about you, Joseph?
Three amigos. We got to find one way to get the three amigos in. Now, shocking, man. It's in the title. It's a moment that makes you unexpectedly jump up, turn away. Did you see that holy shit, that oh my god moment? Obviously the unexpected that comes with it, just basically showing up, whether you're there in person or watching it on TV, sitting down, watching the game, watching whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're just, you're shook. You're that jolt in your body that just made you like ask yourself, what the fuck did I just see?
Excellent, guys. So before we start off, just a little preface here. We wanted to keep the shocking moments to within the field of play. There are many important moments that have happened that have shocked us, many real life moments. We're talking about announcements. We're talking about murders. We're talking about some things that have really shook up the sports world and have been tragic. What we wanted to do is we wanted to separate the tragedy, since this is a lighthearted show. And we know those things are more impactful. We know those things are more shocking, but we wanted to give respect to just the stories at large and say we're sticking to stories that happened on the field and that affected the game or that affected somebody's career. So just keep that in mind when you're listening to this. And we will mention some of those important stories in our honorable mentions. But for our selections, we're keeping it to the field of play. And speaking of honorable mentions, Joseph, what are some of your honorable mentions?
One that stood out to me most recently was what is it? But about a year ago, 2 years ago, the shocking and sudden death of Kobe Bryant itself is shocking. The way that it happened with his daughter as well. I remember that day and I couldn't believe, what was happening and whether or not, is this true? Did this really happen? Is this some bullshit fake thing? Is somebody playing a sad, fucking cruel joke? In the end, it wasn't completely shocking. Like you said, we're not oblivious to, the stuff out there that we're going to not talk about, but we are going to mention here. Another moment I remember that was just incredibly shocking to me was the whole Aaron Hernandez situation. Talented football player, just couldn't believe what was going on. I'm not going to lie. I was a fan, not necessarily a fan of the Patriots, but I did, like what they were doing. It was a crazy good team that they had. Just unbelievable. The situation. Just unbelievable how it ended up turning out. I couldn't believe it. I remember the perp walk from his home. I was in shock. I was what is going on? And then when everything that came out afterwards about it, the evidence, I asked myself, and I guess a lot of people did too, did we really know this guy? Who was this person? He wasn't the fun, good time, great smiling, laughing kid that we all thought he was playing football. I mean, it was incredibly shocking. How about you, Bob?
I have a few. I mean, on that note as well, speaking of Naked Gun from last week, O.J. Simpson, the O.J. Simpson was really my first really touch with a shocking moment. This great NFL running back, also this great actor and comedian, right? In these films, ended up going to trial for the murder of his ex-wife. Just a huge, shocking moment. The Kobe Bryant thing, man, that happened last year. It's probably the biggest loss in basketball history, I would say. It was so heartbreaking to hear about Kobe Bryant and his daughter, and like the way you said, the way they died was so tragic and so just heartbreaking. On a different note, when we're talking about actual sports moments that were shocking, the Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, the crowbar to the knee thing that happened in the 90s, to get to the Olympics. I thought that was a crazy, shocking sports moment. I mean, add a little bit of everything. I mean, the jealousy and the craziness that unfolded, and the husband going to jail and all that stuff. They're just such a crazy, crazy thing for you to do, in order to be the best, in order to reach the top. I know Margot Robbie did a movie about a couple of years ago that was just
great
so
movie.
Fucking amazing, dude. Yes, exactly. And another crazy one that happened, the Conor McGregor and Khabib aftermath of their fight. Khabib jumping out of the cage and attacking one of Conor's teammates in the stands, and then Khabib's team fighting with Conor McGregor in the ring. There's all this big melee after the fight. I thought that was a really crazy sports moment. Myles Garrett swinging a helmet at Mason Rudolph during a football game, Thursday night football game.
Could have killed him.
Could have killed the guy. You never see that happening. Just a crazy, crazy moment. Another one I really wanted to talk about was because coincidentally in the UFC, if you watched the UFC fight last night, 261, Jesus Christ, I feel so bad. Chris Weidman, a veteran, a really great fighter, threw a kick at the opening in the opening round, and he snapped his leg in half. It was gruesome and gritty, and oh my God, it made me sick to my stomach. I felt so bad for the guy. And ironically, in 2013, he was fighting against Anderson Silva, who's another UFC great. Anderson Silva threw the exact same kick at Chris Weidman, and Anderson Silva's leg also snapped in half, grotesquely flopped everywhere. I mean, it was just, it's just so ironic and so crazy. And moments like that, I mean, oh my God, they really churn your stomach.
I think excellent selections for both of you. I love I, Tanya. I thought it was a very underrated movie. My favorite scene in that movie is where those two guys, the ones that they pay to do the job there, when they get introduced, they're sitting in the front seat and they're blasting Gloria by Laura Branigan. That these guys are freaking idiots. And I mean, I know they went over the top with the characterizations, but oh man, what a tremendous movie, and what a tragic event that led to it. And now Tanya Harding's kind of lionized at this point. I think she's done Dancing with the Stars. She's kind of told her own story and her own plight with her boyfriend and all the stuff, that she's almost become a sympathetic character, which I mean is a complete twist of the story when it initially came out, because she was seen as this iconoclastic figure that was just jealous and, wanted to get rid of this other athlete because she knew that she was in her way to, represent the United States. I don't know, the great details behind it, but what I do know is that it just made for a great movie. It made for a great story. And I mean, luckily nothing worse happened, because a lot worse could have happened. Pipe to the knee is just insane. Some of the other ones I wanted to mention, when Magic Johnson announced that he had HIV, I was in ninth grade. I was looking back at that. He was only 32 years old. I know point guards age like running backs in the NBA, but being 32 and at the prime, might have been the tail end of his prime, because I know this was the 90s. A 32-year-old point guard in the 90s, a little different than a modern day 32-year-old point guard, probably more like 38 back then. But Magic Johnson announcing that he has HIV was just huge, and it brought so much attention to the causes and to the assistance and to the understanding of it. Kevin Ware from Louisville, Bob, you mentioned leg snapping. When his leg shattered on national TV when he tried to block a shot during the 2013 NCAA tournament. I remember watching that, and I think he was like ready to play by the last game. I think this was in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight. I mean, just insane. Anytime you see a leg snap, it makes for shocking moments. Latrell Sprewell choking his coach, PJ Carlissimo, which was just insane. Yeah. It led to a crazy amount of just Latrell Sprewell getting traded and all this other stuff. Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson. And I will stand, and I know we're going to talk more about this later, but I will stand on my chair and say that the biggest fluke in the world. That's why it's so shocking. I mean, Buster Douglas went on to he didn't have a very stellar career after knocking out Mike Tyson. Huge fluke. Mike Tyson was just in the dumpster at that point with his life and his career. Tyson could have easily handled that guy. The Monica Seles fan stabbing. That was another one that just came out of nowhere, and it was just insane. And two things I want to mention, actually, from two listeners that wrote on our Instagram. Shout out to Leela, an old friend of mine. She mentioned Owen Hart's death. I know like wrestling isn't typical sport, but it is in the sports realm. Hey, if ESPN covers stories on it, why can't we, right? Owen Hart's death, just shocking, happening on a live pay-per-view. Just the pay-per-view went on, and it's just, I mean, I still remember like it was yesterday, Owen Hart's death. And then shout out to Joe Michael Vasquez, who's an avid listener. He mentioned the Montreal screw job, where it really ushered in the Attitude Era, where Vince McMahon became the Mr. McMahon character, and the WWF went from this cartoon, fan-friendly, kid-friendly environment to the Raw era, the Attitude Era. And Joe Michael is an incredible wrestling mind. Yeah, he did predict that Marty Jannetty would have a better career than Shawn Michaels, and he would also argue that Giant Gonzalez should have had a championship run. But great comment about the Montreal screw job for Joe Michael. So we're going to get into our selections. And Joseph, you have the first selection. Tell us a little bit about who you picked and why.
All right, so I went with what is known to this day as the play. If you're not familiar with the play is, it was a last-second kickoff during a college football game between the Stanford Cardinals, or Cardinal, however you want to call them. I've never really seen it pluralized. If it's a team, it's pluralized. Anyway, Stanford Cardinals and the California Golden Bears, or Cal Golden Bears as they're referred to most of the time. The game took place on Saturday, November 20th, 1982, almost 3 years before I was born. So to be fair, I didn't see this live, and it wasn't until much later that I was able to see this play and understand just how crazy in history this is for sports. It's recognized as one of the most memorable plays in college football history and among the most memorable in American sports. Not to mention, it was a rivalry game, and winning those always means way more than it is on paper. So for it to end this way, just insane. If you're not familiar with this play, basically Stanford took a 20-19 lead on a field goal, with 4 seconds left. And on the ensuing kickoff, the Bears used 5 lateral passes to score the winning touchdown and earn a 25-20 victory. Believing that the game was over, several members of the Stanford band rushed out onto the field in celebration midway through the return. Now, I looked at as many videos as I could, and I couldn't find one that showed, the band actually running out onto the field until later on. If you've seen the videos online, you see later on throughout the play that, yes, the band's on the field, the most iconic line, "The band is on the field." That whole moment.
Joe Starkey, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to find video because there's a lot of, nowadays there's a lot of angles that have come out showing additional footage, but I wasn't able to find one that showed, when the band exactly started running out of the field. There was a moment though, on the third lateral of the 5 where number 43, Dwight Garner, I believe he's running straight ahead, and then all of a sudden he's surrounded by 5 Stanford players while being while being tackled, he somehow manages to pitch the ball back to another player. And it was at this moment, most people believe that Garner had been tackled and the game was over. I did look at the video, and some could say that, he may have been down. It's really hard to tell. This is way back. This was, again, back in the 80s. We don't have the 4K cameras that we have nowadays, or video replay. You could argue that his left leg goes down in the pile and his right leg is up. I can't tell. It's just no way to really tell. So he laterals the ball back and the play continues. In the end, it's the fifth lateral. It was number 26, Kevin Moen, who scooped up the ball first after the kick. And he's the one that ended up with the ball at the end, running through the band and scoring the game-winning touchdown and giving Gary Terrell probably the moment he'd most like to forget in his life. Gary was the trombone player on the receiving end of Moen's touchdown celebration. If you haven't seen this, I mean, he just crashed down on him, puts him down on the ground. Dude probably asking himself, what the fuck happened? I mean, and there's actually a really good photo. Somebody was able to snap a photo in the end zone of Moen jumping up in the air. Not when he crashes down on Terrell, but it's a great photo. He's so excited. He scored a touchdown, but the seconds after that, I mean, he just smashes the guy down. The guy's on the floor, and he's probably like, oh my God, what the hell? Anyway, the confusion and the folklore surrounding the game only add to its legend to this day. There remains disagreement over the legality of two of the backward pass attempts, which only adds to this rivalry game played every year. Again, it was years later that I saw this play, and even then, when I did see it, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. It was just incredible. The whole laterals in general are just crazy. Anytime you can pull something out of your ass to win the game at the last moment, whether it's a home run, walk-off home run, last touchdown, three-pointer at the end, it's just crazy. But this one, insane. I couldn't believe it. To this day, John Elway, for many, many years, felt cheated. John Elway was the quarterback of Stanford at the time. I didn't mention that. He felt cheated over the outcome, saying it was an insult to college football. The officials ruined my last game as a college football player. Some say this loss cost him the Heisman Trophy that year. There's been many last-minute plays in sports history that have shocked us, but because to this day, it's still highly debated. And although Elway has gotten over it to some point this year, nowadays, the fact that we still argue it, the fact that Cal fans and Stanford fans still argue this to this day, never getting actually a clear view or whether it was legal or not legal, that's why I chose this moment. It's just crazy. I can watch this to this day, still freak out about the ban. You can show this to the young players, the young kids that are playing football nowadays, and they'd still freak out. I mean, imagine showing this video of a play in the 80s to these kids that are just playing freshman high school football right now. It's insane. They'd flip out. If they don't know about it, I would hope that they would go out there and check this.
Oh man, I have to agree. It's probably the most memorable college football play, at least in my mind, of all time. Me being, y'all know, I'm a huge John Elway fan, big time Denver Bronco fan because of John Elway. He is a bit of a tight ass. He's still complaining about that damn play. Yeah, but it's crazy how his huge, nobody talks about it, but he drove his team down, I think like 80 or 90 yards to set up that game-winning field goal to go up with 4 seconds left. I mean, that was his drive. He's actually known for the drive, right, in the Cleveland Browns game.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention it. I mean, Elway did his part.
Yes,
to his credit, he did his part.
Can I say something about before you finish, Bob? Fuck John Elway, because this was a guy at 22 years old, he did not want to get drafted by the Colts. So he threatened to play baseball if the Colts were to draft him. So, I mean, not only did he take his crybaby antics from this game, but he carried it on to the draft and refused to play for the Colts. But go on. I just want to
those are fighting words.
That was a total little bitch move. Yes, I agree. The reason I don't even want to go into why. I mean, he was a running quarterback. He was like Randall Cunningham, who you know. Who I was a huge fan of. This was the running quarterbacks before running quarterbacks was an actual thing, right? But yeah, his last drive was so nullified. I mean, you said it perfectly. This game could have cost him his Heisman Trophy, right?
Possibly.
I really do think it's one of the most memorable plays in college football history, like I said, and people still talk about it to this day. The band is on the field. I love that. I love that line, but as far as shocking is concerned, I don't feel like it was a shock. I don't feel it was like, oh shit, it was a crazy play. I think I was more excited. I'm still get excited for the play when I watch it, but I don't feel like I was shocked. That's the way it ends. I mean, granted, since then there's been a lot of games that ended with those laterals and the tossing back, and they manage, teams manage to pull that off. So it's not totally uncommon. It's rare, but it's not totally uncommon. But I feel like it's more of an exciting play, a great play, rather than being like, oh man, it was a shocking moment. At least to me, I love this play. I love your choice. It's hard to argue against all of ours, but that's my take. It's more of an exciting end of the game play rather than a shocking moment.
What about you, Randy?
I will say this. I don't think it's the most shocking football moment. I think that distinction belongs to a kid that went to our high school and knocked the shit out of the ref. Anyway, but last fall, and he apologized for it. Anyway, I think it's a seminal moment for the jock versus nerds paradigm. This was 1982. Remember, the 80s was very jock versus nerd, Revenge of the Nerds. You're either a jock or you're a nerd. I think this was a seminal moment because of what happened to the trombone player. The spike on the trombone player is what does it for me. It's like, get out of my way, nerd. Like, I could have just walked in there and he was like, I'm just going to spike it on like the most vulnerable person, which was a trombone player. Don't draft the Stanford band for your fantasy football defense, by the way, because you would think that at least the drum major who has nothing to do but to swing his hands, or the guy that holds the cymbals, could have tripped them. I think what would have made this the most shocking sports moment is if one of the band guys said, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to go for the guy's legs. I know this guy's like 225 pounds. And he's lightning fast. But if you have between the 10-yard line and the goal line, you had about 20 band members. You can't tell me that 5 of them couldn't have gang tackled them. I mean, come on. And some of these band members are kind of big. They could have tripped them up. They could have done something. And that, I think, would have made for a more shocking moment. But I mean, who told the band the game was over? I don't know who the band director was, but
yeah.
Why did they say, hey, come on the field? There's still seconds left. And the thing is, Cal, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it was fans and the band. You know what I mean? I think a few fans started running on the field, so that they're just band. You're still kids. They ran on. They followed along.
If you read nowadays, and the band players that were interviewed back then, and the situation, a lot of them say it was that lateral. It's the third one to Dwight Garner, who they thought he was down, and if you watch the video, you'll see, like, I mean, you could argue it both ways, but you're going to go back and forth with it all day. There really is no, conclusive evidence that he was down, but they thought he was down. I mean, if you watch the video, like I think I mentioned, he had 5 dudes around him. Somehow he survived this 5 guys tackling him enough to pass the ball back. And I mean, I would have thought he was down too. Doesn't mean I would have ran on the field though.
I know that when I was listening to the commentary, when Stanford did the squib kick, obviously for those of football, squib kick's going to take time off. The Cal team had time to grab the ball and go out of bounds, because that's what everybody was thinking. They're going to grab the ball, go out of bounds about the 50-yard line, throw a 50-yard Hail Mary for an opportunity to win the game. So there was time on the field. It wasn't like this was like, we're going to kick it and then time's going to run out. I think they had like maybe 2 seconds left on the clock, where if they had gone out of bounds, they would have had time for one more play. So whoever was the band director, horrible decision to get those guys out on the field, or get those people on the field. Joe Starkey was the commentator, and it was a great call. I mean, thank God it wasn't monotone Joe Buck, because he would have really ruined this for me, man. But I honestly think what would have happened, going back to my point where the band members should have tackled him, it should have been like they should have tackled him, left him on the ground, and then marched to Louie like they did to Ricardo Montalban on the Naked Gun, and just walked over. I would have loved to have seen Rob Gronkowski score on this play. Could you imagine? He probably would have not only smashed the trombone player, he probably would have like dry humped the tuba player, and then done all sorts of crazy shit. But it was a great play. I watched this play because it's a quick watch for those of you who want to go on YouTube.
Play.
Yeah, you go to Stanford Cal. It's about 30 seconds, and it is an insane finish. It's one of the craziest finishes to a football game ever, probably the craziest, because there was non-football personnel on the field. That made it a decisive game, essentially. I don't know if some of the band members blocked some of the Stanford Cardinal, that they were off camera. I don't know what happened, but it was just a crazy intense game. Check it out. I do think it was a shocking moment. I don't know if it was the most shocking moment. I think that's what we're here to argue, but it was a great selection. I love watching this. It's great for high comedy. If you watch the game, listen to Joe Starkey. He does one of the best calls in the world. And just the trombone player getting spiked. That's what does it for me, man. It's hilarious.
Shout out to Gary Terrell.
I wonder what he's doing now. Probably like runs a grocery store or something.
We'll make sure we tag him in today and once we post the episode.
We got to find him.
And on that note, what did you choose, Rand? What was your big or most shocking moment?
I got to go with something that's very near and dear to me. A huge NBA fan. I knew I was going to find something in the NBA because so many crazy things. You could always rely on like boxing and the NBA to bring you some insane moments. I wanted to go with the Malice at the Palace, and shout out to Kenny because I know he mentioned it on the comments. When I saw him, I saw him mention the Malice at the Palace. I was like, oh, that's my selection. I have a little bit of a history with this game. My best friend Carlos, rest in peace. His birthday's on November the 14th, and we were planning on hanging out that week, and he was working night shifts. And this game happened November 19th, 2004. And he's a huge Pistons fan. Carlos got me into basketball. I was a huge wrestling fan, and he would always talk about the bad boy Pistons and, oh, you got to watch these guys. They're just like wrestlers. And so he got me into basketball. And my favorite team initially was the Detroit Pistons. And I switched off to rooting for the Spurs. So I was on the phone with him. And this was off the heels of the Pistons winning the title. They won with a team that they weren't expected to win with, and they were looking to repeat. Well, this kind of sidetracked their chances. Actually, they did go back to the finals against the Spurs and lost in 7 games. Indiana was primed to make the finals as well. Indiana, the other team in this story, they played Detroit in the 2004 Eastern Conference Finals. So this was a rematch. It was one of the most infamous brawls in NBA history. When I was talking to Carlos, because I had called him that night, and we were watching, I was like, "Oh, dude, your team's getting wiped by the Pacers," and we're just like, "Yeah, what are we going to do tomorrow for my birthday?" And then we went from like this conversation just evolved into like, holy shit, look what's going on. It was the most infamous brawl in NBA history. In the age of social media, this would never happen. Players are too friendly and informed. Imagine if you left the game early and you were getting nachos or you went to the bathroom. Now I'm going to break it down for you right now. Pacers were up 97-82 with 45.9 seconds left. Ben Wallace, who should be noted that Ben Wallace was coming off a very emotional time. His mother had just passed away. He wasn't even supposed to play in this game, so emotion was very high for him. He attempts a layup, and he was fouled hard by Ron Artest, who some might know as Meta World Peace, but we'll call him Ron Artest because he was Ron Artest for this game. Wallace then shoves Artest hard, and this is back when Ben Wallace was built like an Avenger at one point in his life. He was
that guy was huge.
He was huge, and Artest lays down on the table. He relaxes, and a blue cup of beer flies from the stands and hits him. It hit him, and then all hell broke loose. The line of the night was, I think it was Mike Breen with a serious face, says Ron Artest has a look in his eye that's very scary right now. And within seconds, Ron Artest charges up the stands to attack the fan who he thinks threw the blue cup at him. Imagine being in the stands and 6'8" Ron Artest charges you. I mean, it's a nightmare. Steven Jackson obliterated some dude in the stands. Steven Jackson is a teammate. And for those of you who don't know Steven Jackson is another emotionally charged player. A guy who looked like Turtle from Entourage charged Jermaine O'Neal, and O'Neal decked him. The only thing that saved Turtle's life was O'Neal slipped on the liquid on the court. I play Super Smash Brothers with my son, and the shit that he did, it looked like the Captain Falcon punch. I mean, if he would have connected with all his might, he probably would have killed this guy. So things were going crazy everywhere. It was a melee. Players were in the stands. Fans were throwing cups. They were throwing food onto the court. This was a game featuring Ron Artest, Ben Wallace, Steven Jackson, Rasheed Wallace, Jermaine O'Neal. And by the way, you know that shit is never good when Rasheed Wallace is the peacemaker. Rasheed Wallace was trying to call him stuff. This is a guy who's broken the record for technicals in the season. The NBA, the aftermath, they suspended 9 players, a total of 146 games, leading players to losing $11 million in salary. 5 players were charged with assault. And they were sentenced to a year probation and community service. 5 fans also faced assault charges and were banned from Pistons. They were banned from Pistons games for life. The fight also led to the NBA increasing securities between players and fans and limiting the sale of alcohol at games. I think that's why they don't sell alcohol after the 3rd quarter anymore. It was on ESPN. It was on ESPN.
Bastards.
Yes. Because of these guys. Blame it on Ron Artest, and next time you can't get a drink for overtime. I remember Jamal Tinsley running back from the locker room, swinging one of those cafeteria trash can scoopers. Like, he was ready for war. Scott Pollard, who was an injured Pacers player, he looked like a 7-foot version of Huey Lewis. He was trying to protect his teammate. Tayshaun Prince was the only player not to leave the bench. One of the fans involved in the brawl admitted that he had an alcohol problem. Yeah, no shit. And he and Artest, they eventually squashed it. As I mentioned, Reggie Miller mentioned how an officer was about to spray Ron Artest with mace. Now, keep in mind, this was Reggie Miller's last season. And Reggie Miller was looking forward. We know the stories of Reggie Miller where he played against the legendary Bulls. He never got to the NBA Finals. And he did get to the finals once, but the Lakers beat them. And this was Reggie Miller's last opportunity. He was injured during this game, but the season was white for the Pacers because all their star players had to leave. Ron Artest was suspended for the rest of the season. Ron Artest, in the back of the locker room, Ron Artest asked Steven Jackson, "Hey, do you think we're going to get in trouble?" To which Steven Jackson said, "Yeah, we're lucky if we have a job after this." And it just was a melee. You could watch it on YouTube. It was just, things were going everywhere. And keep in mind that fans were flying. I mean, you could see Ben Wallace, you could see Jermaine O'Neal just tossing people like it was the Royal Rumble. It was insane. It caused a change in security. It caused a change in alcohol sales. It caused a change in the way players are treated. Guys, what are your thoughts about this crazy melee?
I remember this very much. I actually got to see this on live. This was shocking. I mean, it was very shocking. I remember watching it, and as a fan, I fucking hated Ron Artest. I thought he was a douchebag. But as a fan, I know just because you're not a fan, just because you're not a fan of a player on another team doesn't give you the right to throw drinks or food at them during the game. I mean, it's just fucking despicable, disrespectful. I mean, it's just horrible. I mean, how would I like it if somebody came into my office and fucking threw a coffee at me in the morning? I mean, what the fuck would that be? I mean, it's just guys trying to do his job. They're just trying to do their job. It is what it is. It's sports, but it's their job. It's shocking. I've seen Ron Artest run up the bleachers. I remember when the cup flew over him and he gets up and you're like, what the hell is he doing? He's running up and by the way, you did mention it. The guy that he thought threw the cup at him, it was actually the wrong guy.
It was the wrong guy.
Poor guy.
He got punched for his trouble. Yeah.
Thankfully, nobody, from what I remember, when this was happening, you knew it wasn't going to end well. Thankfully, nobody died, from what I remember, as far as I know. Was he justified in doing so? That's not up for me to say. Everything that happened, the many fans trying to throw punches at players. And yes, you mentioned the Jermaine O'Neal thing. I remember seeing that one. I thought it was stupid. I don't know if it was Jermaine O'Neal I remember the guy walking on the court and he's like trying to square up to him. I don't know if it was O'Neal. I thought he was trying to like talk shit to somebody else. And then O'Neal comes out of nowhere. I remember O'Neal coming out of nowhere and saying like throwing that punch. And you're right. He slipped. And that was crazy. I don't know what the fuck that guy was thinking. Like, you're some little yes, exactly. You described it perfectly. Like
he looked like Turtle from Entourage.
Yes, you described it perfectly. Feet tall. What the fuck is this guy gonna do? Like, what do you think you're gonna do? Are you insane? But anyway, you're right. It was it changed everything. The changed the rules. There was legal implications. I think there was arrest made. I don't think any of the players were arrested, but definitely the people in the stands. I mean, everything. I don't think anybody that went to that game that night thought like, this is what's going to happen. This is the definition of shocking. Like we mentioned earlier, you're there and then something happens. It's not supposed to happen. I put this up there. I was going to tell you, I'm putting it up there with mine as far as shocking. I'm not going to say that yours is better, but it's definitely very shocking. And we're going to have to leave that up to the listeners to decide. This was insane. It's just crazy. Bob, how about you?
Go ahead, Bob.
When I think about that, I did not see it live. I actually think that this is one of the things that hurts your selection, Rand. I mean, it was a Friday night game in November. I believe the Pistons were 6-2 and the Pacers were 4-5. I mean, it was at the beginning of the season. You and Carlos may have been the only fuckers watching this game if you didn't live in Detroit or in Indianapolis.
Hey, Kid Rock was in the stands.
Sorry. Kid Rock.
Usually people throw shit at him. Yeah.
Apparently there was cheap beer, right? I think this may hurt your selection, that it wasn't like this big, huge playoff game where everybody's watching. It was a crazy play and Ron Artest running up into the stands. But I think it just had the fortunate or unfortunate benefit of being regurgitated on ESPN and SportsCenter over and over and over and over again. Most people wouldn't have even seen it if ESPN hadn't played it over and over and over and over and over again. It was like MTV video of Nirvana, right? I think that's what kind of hurts it. if because it wasn't in the big grand stage, it wasn't in the playoffs, it wasn't in the in the finals, excuse me. It was just an everyday game at the beginning of the season. Yes, it was nuts that they got into fights and it was this huge brawl, but I mean, there's been plenty of bench clearing brawls in basketball and in baseball. I mean, shit, in baseball, it happens every other goddamn day. You know, especially in basketball, I think of like the Lakers and Celtics in the 70s, them going at it. I can still picture Van Gundy being dragged across the floor.
Alonzo Mourning. Yeah.
Alonzo Mourning.
Like a chihuahua, yeah.
I mean, there's been plenty of brawls and fights. And, you know, I know that the X factor is here that they hit a fan. But, you know, Dennis Rodman kicked a cameraman. If you saw the end of Oregon playing Boise State, a famous running back who played for the Patriots, LeGarrette Blount, actually clocks a fan after the game. You know, the fans ran on the field and they're cheering, of course, with their team, like college fans do, especially in the, you know, the band is on the field, right? And LeGarrette Blount just cold cocks him and knocks him out. You know what I mean? Cheap shot. You know, the fan wasn't doing anything. He was running past him. So, you know, it was an extremely shocking moment, not to take anything away from it. I mean, probably one of the worst fights in sports history that wasn't in a boxing ring or in a UFC octagon. It amazes me how crazy it got and how there were so many people involved. It really did look like a baseball fight in a basketball stadium, which was pretty nuts. But I think that the one thing that kind of holds it back and stops it from being the number one. Now, I wouldn't say it's like, oh, it's nowhere near shit. It's top 3 easily, I could say. But I think the one thing that holds it back is just an everyday game that didn't have a lot of fanfare. SportsCenter, though, really pushed that sucker, really pushed it.
You know, I agree with you. It was early in the season. If this happened in the playoffs, this would have been a much bigger story. It did come off the heels of a very heated playoff series the year before, and most of the party was back. And then you look at the fact, and look at the players in this game: Steven Jackson, Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace, Ron Artest. I mean, these guys, I mean, in their own accord, have done some very crazy things on the court. And then you put them together, and then a brawl breaks out. It's like having like Mick Foley, Terry Funk, Bruiser Brody, and all these other guys like in the same match with barbed wire and steel chairs. This wasn't like Jimmer Fredette and or Bill Laimbeer or whoever. These guys were like guys who were tough in their own right, and you know, bad. And not only that, Rick Mahorn was in the audience, or I think he was a commentator, and he came out. Rick Mahorn was an old Detroit Piston player known for his aggressiveness and toughness, so he was involved too. Chuck Person was there as well. He was another guy, and these guys were like really, I mean, tough guys. And for them to, I think the biggest shock for me is not so much that they brought, I know we're focusing a lot on the brawl, but when you get these guys coming into the stands, all these guys above 6'7", tremendous athletes in the prime of their career, throwing fans around. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, the fans didn't have a chance. Anybody who threw a cup at Ron Artest, you're stupid, because Ron Artest is not going to take your shit, obviously. And I think that was the most shocking thing for me, is that somebody thought it was a good idea to mess with this guy, especially in a heated moment. And then, of course, Ron Artest thought it was a good idea to run up. But I mean, Steven Jackson had his back, and I'm sure the guy who threw the cup or didn't throw the cup and got hit, I'm sure he was, you know, shitting his pants when he saw these guys charging up. Probably never came to a basketball game after that. But you know, that's my argument. And I mean, it was an insane. People still talk about it. I can't wait for the 30 for 30. But
it's funny that you mentioned Kid Rock was there. I'm sure at the moment he probably thought somebody fucking play Ball with the Ball right now, or somebody hit Ball with the Ball. It's the perfect song. You know,
I'm sure he was like, finally, people aren't throwing shit at me, justifiably, of course. But Bob, let's go with your selection. What do you got for us?
Oh man, well, you know, y'all brought 2 really great selections to the table, and they've been really hard to argue. But I think I have the winner. I think I have the game winner, and I decided to go with Tyson Holyfield, the bite fight. Okay. This one, it's the most shocking and bizarre sports moment in history, in any type of sport. This took place on June 28, 1997 at the MGM Grand Arena. Iron Mike Tyson faced off against Evander, the real deal Holyfield, in probably the biggest heavyweight fight since Ali Frazier. Coincidentally, Holyfield had just defeated Tyson in an 11-round upset just 7 months prior to this rematch. And this fight was the most anticipated fight of the decade as far as boxing is concerned. Boxing itself has always been, one of the most captivating and exciting sports in the world. It's brought us some of the best fights. You talked about earlier, the biggest upsets, some of the greatest sports moments that sports fans have ever seen. And at this point in the 90s, the last golden era of boxing that I think of, boxing pay-per-view was just hitting its peak in popularity. And it brought us some of the best fights and biggest names in boxing history. We had the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Holyfields, the Roy Jones Jr.'s, Julio Cesar Chavez, Felix Trinidad, more, and I can go on and on and on and on. But there was no one more polarizing and popular than Mike Tyson in the 90s. He was the biggest name in boxing, the biggest draw in boxing in the 90s. He was a pay-per-view giant. I'm sure you all can tell stories of going to your uncle's house or having people come over to your house because you had to go rent the box at the cable company to watch the pay-per-view fight, and everybody be surrounded by, back in the day we didn't have big screen TVs. Everybody had that little ass TV. Everybody be sitting around and standing around the living room watching the fight. It was so epic. And so if you watched a boxing pay-per-view fight in the 90s, 9 out of 10 times it was to see Tyson knock the shit out of some poor bastard in the first or second round. And this heavyweight fight, this rematch, was huge, man. It had one of the largest audiences worldwide. I believe they had over 180 million views, both in audience and worldwide. And back in the 90s, that's fucking amazing. Those were amazing numbers. And all the audience, all their eyes were on Tyson. They wanted to see if he could recapture that, lightning in the bottle again, if he can get his title back and avenge that big loss to Holyfield that just happened just 11 months before, right? Or 7 months before, excuse me. But as the fight began, that atmosphere, that crazy, exciting atmosphere turned from that excitement, anticipation to this, what the fuck just happened? And it's just one of those things you don't think it's fucking real. You don't see it happening. Like, what the hell am I watching? So in the first round, after receiving a headbutt from Holyfield and getting a cut over his eye, Tyson immediately gets irritated. And coming out in round 2, he has to get reminded by the referee Mills Lane to put his mouthpiece in, which he does. And after a few short punches, they come into a clinch, both Holyfield and Tyson. Tyson spits out his mouthpiece and takes a bite out of Holyfield's ear in retaliation, ripping off a big chunk of his ear. Watching this, you don't know exactly what happened because they don't show you the close-up of the replay just yet. But Holyfield starts jumping up and down and pointing to his ear and jumping up and down. Tyson pushes him from behind, has to be separated. The announcers are left speechless. The audience at home, all of us are like, what the fuck is going on? Through this melee and this craziness, they separate it. And the pay-per-view shows a replay, and you can clearly see Tyson taking a bite out of fucking Holyfield's ear and then spitting the chunk of ear to the ground. And at that moment, everybody's like, what the fuck? Holy shit. This is something you never expect to see. And even more crazy. So this happens. The replay shows that it happens. They let them fight. They let the fight continue. Amazingly, I have no idea why, but maybe because there was just so many viewers, there's so much money on the line. They let the fight continue. And within moments, they clinch again, and Tyson tries to take a bite out of his other fucking ear, in which they get separated, and a big melee ensues, and the fight gets called off, and of course, Tyson gets disqualified. But the fight just the ending, it was so shocking and so bizarre, and just like the craziest fucking moment in sports history. You talk about basketball, and we talked about the plays on the field. Boxing is a sport where people fight, and you expect damage, you expect cuts, you expect blood, you expect to see some brutality, right? But never in a million years would you expect to see somebody biting somebody else's ear in a professional boxing ring. And it wasn't just some rinky-dink fucking boxers. It wasn't on, Friday Night Fights on HBO or USA Network. This was the biggest pay-per-view ever in the 90s between the great Evander Holyfield and Iron Mike Tyson for the fucking WBA heavyweight title. It was huge. When I think of shocking sports moments, I think of something I thought I never would see. It's a 1 in a million thing, something that just fucking shocks me. And that holy shit moment, that what the fuck moment. This is it, man. Never in a million years would I think that I'd see one man bite another man's ear off during a boxing fight.
Okay. I have a few things. Bob, we actually watched this. We watched this together.
Yes,
we watched
we did.
this at your house.
Yes, at my house.
Yes. yes. Nobody ate the barbecue afterwards. But my thing, and I think I'm going to put the kibosh on the I guess this made sense. I mean, are we really shocked that Mike Tyson did this? I mean, the guy who threatened to eat people's kids and who was judging beauty pageants and hitting on contestants and doing all at this time, I think Mike Tyson could have robbed a bank with his fist and none of us would have been surprised. I mean, I don't know if we're really shocked that Mike Tyson was doing stuff that was insane. I mean, thankfully he's sort of come to a, older, more mature Mike Tyson. Maybe he won't bite your ear anymore, but I mean, I just when I hear Tyson doing this at this moment, I'm like, yeah, it's shocking. And it was shocking. I mean, somebody getting their ear bitten off that wasn't in a horror movie. I mean, it's some crazy shit. There was some dude putting water on Holyfield's ear like it was supposed to grow back like a plant or something. I thought it was crazy. Like, what are you doing putting water in his ear? It's not going to grow back. There was only a 1-point deduction, which I think is the most shocking thing of this whole story. So many fighters have scars on their heads because of Holyfield's headbutts. He was a noted headbutter. Can we say that he was asking for it, that it was about time somebody did something to him? Because Holyfield put a lot of scars on people's heads with his massive dome headbutting them when after hugs and stuff. And the big question is, how is Holyfield wearing a face mask nowadays? I mean, I don't know. But I mean, to me, boxing was already on the downturn, excuse me. I think we were really grasping for some of that glory with Mike Tyson, and Holyfield was still, of course, at the top of his game. I think this is when heavyweight boxing at least really took a downturn, and I don't think ever fully recovered. I mean, we've had a couple of good fighters in the past decades or so, the Klitschko's and et cetera. But I mean, after this, it just became a spectacle. It became ridiculous. I think it was shocking, but when you consider the person who did it, kind of makes me less shocked by it. That's just me. Joseph, what do you got to say?
Actually, you know what? I mean, I gotta agree with you, Randy. I mean, I looked at this when I was reviewing the incident and what was going on, and before basically tell you I agree with you, I'd like to say I thought it was pretty funny how in the corner, I think it was 2 points he took from him. It was Mills Lane, rest in peace. It was a great, one of the best to do refereeing for some of his great fights. But Mills Lane went to the corner, and Mike Tyson tried to tell him that it was due to a punch that the chunk of his ear came off. And Mills Lane tells him, "Bullshit, you motherfucker! You know what happened. We know what you did. You know, I thought he punched his ear off. Yeah, Mike Tyson tried to tell him that it was because it was the result of a punch. Crazy. I know you. I think you mentioned it earlier about how Tyson, after the loss to Buster Douglas. I mean, this was 10 fights later, I believe. This was the second of the Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson.
That's what I found more shocking was Buster Douglas. But go ahead.
But I think you mentioned it at the time of that loss. You know, Tyson was the things that were going on around him, whether it was management, I'm not gonna. Was it drugs? I don't know. This was not this was a different Tyson, and that maybe affected that loss too. Mm-hmm. He did win. What was it? 7 fights afterwards, still knocking people out, still doing what he does. Lost the first one, Evander Holyfield, the second one. So I agree. Like at this time in Tyson's life, I mean, the shit that was surrounding him, the things he was doing, that freaking interview in the ring, where he goes off and he says some great, some funny stuff, but then saying, "I'm gonna eat his children," you know.
I was waiting for somebody to impersonate him.
No, I wouldn't do it justice.
You know, I was like, "Yeah, you're right." Like he said, he tried to eat an ear. He's gonna eat some children later on. You know, that's what he wanted to do. So I just think like it's not. People probably there were probably like, "Yeah, that seems about right. That seems about what Mike Tyson do." I love Mike Tyson. I loved watching him fight. I love to watch his old fights, the clinic that he put on. He's tremendous. He had his style, his everything. The knockouts were insane. If you love, to see people get their ass kicked, poor guys get, put down on the floor, then watch his old fights. I love more that he's in a better place. He seems to be got his life in order. He seems healthy and happy. I mean, he is healthy. We saw him get in shape to fight Roy Jones, kind of fight Roy Jones, but he got in shape. I mean, it's great. I love him. And I just think that like, maybe we kind of, we're not really shocked by what he did.
Well, I want to respond because, he had a lot of, yes, he lost to Buster Douglas, that was in his big huge downfall and fall from grace, right? And he went to jail for a time for his domestic disputes, everything like that. But he had just made that comeback. And yes, he was looked at this scary individual. He was knocking people out. He had just won the world title again. He was back on top of the world. And then he faced Evander Holyfield in that first fight, and they had a great fight. And he ends up getting, knocked out, and they're knocked down in the 11th round and loses. So, and I have to disagree. Boxing at this point in time was still on that rise. I know boxing pay-per-view, and Mike Tyson, they were synonymous. Just like UFC, I think UFC and Conor McGregor, those pay-per-views sell out, and they're so huge because he's a spectacle. Mike Tyson was a spectacle. This is on a grand stage, this huge stage. Everybody's watching, and yes, Tyson's a crazy motherfucker. That's not his gimmick. That's who he was at the time, and all the craziness and everything that happened. It all happened outside the ring, and every one of his fights, he was knocking the fuck out of people. He didn't have to fight dirty. He never had to fight dirty because he would knock people out of existence. He would knock people out, put them in the ground, no matter who it was. I think that, it shouldn't be overshadowed because, he was crazy. Nobody in the history of boxing. If somebody headbutts you, you either headbutt him back or you fucking give him a low blow. And that's usually the retaliation, not spit out your mouthpiece and bite him and bite his fucking ear off. It's something that has never happened before. It's something that hasn't happened since and will never happen again. It's just one of those once in a lifetime fucked up, crazy moments, man. And it was that golden era of boxing. After that, there's so many great names of boxing in the 90s, and then the 2000s, that's when I think the decline happens. It's just, then all we're left with is Floyd Mayweather and a bunch of the older guys that are just trying to hold on to some fame or get a big paycheck afterwards. But that Mike Tyson incident, man, it was just in the biggest fight of the 90s on the grandest stage with everybody watching on pay-per-view. I don't think you could beat that moment.
I'm not denying that. Go ahead. I'm not denying that the moment is insane and it's crazy. I just think that if you polled 100 people, 50 might say, yeah, that was shocking. And the other half, it's either going to be 50-50 or 60-40, one way or the other, of people saying that was shocking. And I'm not really shocked by what he did.
That's if. And if my aunt had nuts, she'd be my uncle. You can't talk about scenarios that are, what I mean?
I get your point, but it is a shocking thing. Don't get me wrong. If this was Oscar De La Hoya biting somebody's ear like a carne asada or whatever, then I would be like, "Holy shit! Did you see what Oscar De La Hoya did?"
Well, that was my reaction when he took a picture wearing fishnet stockings.
Nowadays, I wouldn't be surprised. Nowadays, the shit that he does nowadays, you won't be surprised.
But Tyson was just in that zone, man. He was just out there. He was, oh man, it was a shocking thing, but I guess to your point, Bob, has he done anything more shocking than this? I can't say he has behavior wise. The only thing I would say is that if you're talking shocking to Mike Tyson, the only thing I would consider is Buster Douglas knocking him out. Total fluke, total shock to me.
I could see you saying that, but all these fighters, all the greats get upset. You know what I mean? So I feel it's more of an upset, not as much like a huge shock.
We laid our cases out there. We'd like to hear what everybody thought about this. One thing we didn't mention, guys, is the Randy Johnson bird incident.
Yeah,
we forgot to mention that.
Talk about a once in a lifetime, thing that's ever happened. That's a once in a lifetime.
Insane. That's it kind of makes you think like. Was it supposed to happen? I don't know.
Who cares? It's a rat with wings.
You know what? I will mention too. What's crazy? I think when the whole OJ thing was going on, the women's national soccer team was winning. Weren't they competing for the cup?
Yeah, I believe so.
At the same time, wasn't it? I think it was going on at the same time. It was this whole, that whole OJ Simpson situation, the chase. People refer to that sometimes as the birth of reality TV. It's crazy.
The Knicks Rockets finals were going on at that time too, and that series went 7 games, and NBC or whoever cut away from that to watch the white Bronco being chased. And when I say white Bronco, I'm not talking about John Elway. But so yeah, it was insane. And I think that's a good point that you made, Joseph, that a lot of the sports stuff that are bigger than what we see on the field, it is reality and it is real life. And we mentioned a couple of people, Tyson and Ron Artest and several other people who have had issues outside of the field of play and who have sought help, who have gotten better. Ron Artest was very famous for hitting a game-winning shot with the Lakers, and he thanked his psychiatrist at the end of the interview. And you know, and it raised awareness about, you know, therapy and going out there and you know, making sure that you're okay and taking away that stigma. So shout outs to Ron Artest for doing that. But I mean, great talk, guys. That's our show, everybody. Listeners, we'd like to hear from you. What do you think was the most shocking moment in sports? What did we not mention? Most importantly, let us know what you think about the show. You can reach us at Formidable Opponents. I said that, Formidable. That's for you, Edric, by the way, at gmail.com. And follow us on Twitter at FOpponents. And you can also follow us on Instagram at formidable_opponents. And join us next week as we argue worst 80s music video. Yes.
Oh, shit.
We not just do the best here. We also argue the worst 80s music video. We'll be posting clips on our Instagram, so be looking out for that. We'd love for you guys to listen. For Bob and Joseph, I'm Randall. Thank you guys once again. We'll see y'all next week.